So, welcome back, everyone. It's been a bit of a while. How are you doing, Graham?
Oh, pretty good. How you doing, Ariel?
It's starting to heat up here in Arizona, so, I mean, you know, days are getting longer. Sun's rising earlier, setting later.
And it's getting closer, which makes it hotter.
Yep. Yeah, also, I'm trying to think what else. Not a whole lot. I started watching the, that's interesting. For whatever reason, the yellow doesn't show up as well. Maybe because it's like closer to green. But, anyway, so, yeah, honestly, not a whole lot lately. Just been taking it easy. Done with the semester, about just, well, actually, yeah, starting, summer class on Thursday, but yeah, not a whole lot, honestly, which isn't a bad thing. It's nice to have the break every now and then. What about you?
Oh, I've been busy doing stuff, getting, rehabbing different aspects, getting stuff going. Like I said, did the presentation with Miguel a couple weeks ago on Judaism from Plato to Herod the Great. So. Oh
yeah, I still need to check that out. Anyway, so without further ado, I still need to find it. What was I searching for? All right, Parshah Kedoshim. You know what? Yeah, let's just start with this. Save time. Share screen.
David Taub and welcome. Hi, I'm David Taub and welcome to the Parsha Rabbit Hole, where I find something weird in a weekly Torah portion and follow it all the way down until it gets even weirder. This week's rabbit hole eventually gets us to plant people, woolly mammoths, and whether apes are people.
Ape better than human.
But as always, we have to get there. Before we start, I just want to let you know about a new course that I'm starting called DIY Rabbit Hole. One of the things that I've hoped to accomplish with this series is that it might inspire other people to dig their own rabbit holes. And since I started this at the beginning of the year, a number of people have reached out to me asking if I'd consider teaching a course in how to do that. I won't say what that number is, but it's bigger than 3. Anyways, that's what this course is. It's 1 month, 4 weekly Zoom classes, plus a one-on-one Zoom session where we can talk about your ideas and questions. So if you'd like to become an ordained rabbit, go to creativejudaism.com/DIY and sign up for the course. All right, let's get started. This week's Torah portion, Parshah Kedoshim, has a lot of mitzvahs in it, and among them is a prohibition against employing the services of certain types of sorcerers, namely the 𝒒𐒃 and the prohibition against employing.
Oh, okay, this is interesting.
The services of certain types of sorcerers, namely the 𝒒𒃃 and the 𝒒𝒃𐤃. Rashi, as always, gives us some detail as to what these things are. He explains that the 𝒒𝒃 is someone who makes the voice of a spirit speak through his armpit, and the
Wait, is that basically saying it's someone knows how to... That seems like what it's saying.
Well, I take it much more that those are effectively the noises that comes out of their mouth when they speak. So.
Oh, I thought it was more like wah, 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 wah. You know, like in Charlie Brown.
Yeah. Similar to that, different variation. Yeah.
But yeah, so one of the theories, this is what I learned when I learned Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, is that the ov comes from the root av, which means father, but in the context of ancestor, so it means like, a parent or an ancestor. So it's someone who can contact the spirit of the ancestors, or basically a necromancer. Then you have the yidonim, which has the root yada in it, or like yidon, which yidon has the yada root in it, which means to know. It could potentially also be, I actually haven't heard this argued before, but I wouldn't be surprised if it has some connection or connotation of sex magic, because of the fact that yada, that root is also has to do with this idea of sexually knowing someone. But in any case, let's see, the necromancers and the charmers. So the yidonim, the people who, the Baal of the controller of the spirit of, as the necromancer is called, is identical with a pitum. Okay. Anyway, well, let's continue.
The 𝒒𝒃𐤃 is someone who puts the bone of an animal called a yedua in their mouth, and the bone speaks.
Yeah, I have a feeling that it's probably much more than that.
Classic necromancer scam.
So as fascinating as this magic stuff is, that's not the rabbit hole. The rabbit hole is that animal that Rashi mentioned that the bone comes from, the yedua. Rashi doesn't explain what the yedua is there, and neither does the Gemara that he's quoting from. But many other commentaries do identify the yedua as creatures that are also known as the Adnei Hasadeh. As far as I can tell, the earliest source that makes this connection and gives us some details.
The sockets of the field, what?
About this.
Maybe like, would it be like prairie dogs or something that digs holes?
Creature is Rabbeinu Shimshon of Shantz, one of the Balei Tosfos who lived in France in the 1100s. In his commentary on a Mishnah that mentions the Adnei Hasadeh, he says that 1100s. In his Shimshon of Shantz, one of the Balei Tosfos who lived in France in the 1100s. In his commentary on a Mishnah that mentions the Adnei Hasadeh, he says that he heard in the name of another rabbi that the Adnei Hasadeh are the yedua, which is used for the Yidoni practice mentioned in the Torah, and that this creature grows from a vine and comes out of the ground like cucumbers and pumpkins. But other than that, the yedua has a completely human form and has a human face and human body and
is it a mandrake?
Human feet. And it's connected to this cord or vine at its navel. So it's basically an umbilical vine that connects back to the roots in the ground. And then he continues and tells us that this creature is incredibly dangerous and nothing can get near it because it eats everything it can reach within the radius of its cord.
I have a feeling that this seems like it's some mythical allusion to the mandrake. What would you say?
Yeah, it definitely seems like the same sort of stories that grew up around the mandrake, but slight variations on it, definitely.
Yeah, like the idea that it has gourds and melons, similar to the idea of like the mandrake fruits. They're, they're more like tomatoes, but...
And tying the cord around it in order to pick it as well.
True.
Grazing within that radius. And when people hunt it, they can't get close. They have to target the cord at the navel until it breaks and the creature immediately dies. So this is something that I've been fascinated with forever. A ferocious plant monster that's hunted for its magical properties. I'm starving! I've actually been trying to work this into a rabbit hole since the beginning of the year. I thought that maybe the ferocious plant monster that's hunted for its magical properties. I'm starving! I've actually been
It's like I feel like I know what
trying to work this into a rabbit hole since the beginning of the year. I thought that maybe the Mandrake episode might have gotten us there, but it didn't. So now that the Yadini is finally mentioned in the Parsha, I was really excited to finally get the opportunity to dig into the topic of the Adnei Hasada, and I found lots of cool stuff that I had never seen before. So that's where this week's rabbit hole starts, with the Adnei Hasada, or the Yadua, a strange monster that grows from the ground. If you're ready to see where that takes us, let's dive in. Okay, so I said earlier that the Adnei Hasada are mentioned in a Mishnah, and as far as I can tell, this is the earliest time that they show up, but without all the details we get in later sources. The Mishnah is categorizing various animals in terms of their status with regard to various animal-related laws, and it says that the Adnei Hasada is a chaya, a wild animal, which has ramifications for certain laws that I'm not going to get into right now. But then it says that according to Rabbi Yossi, the Adnei Hasada are metame ba'oil, which means that being in the same room as the dead body of it makes a person ritually impure. And then it goes on to other animals and doesn't say anything more about the Adnei Hasada. But this idea that their corpse can transmit impurity by being in the same room is a big deal, because this is a law that only applies to the bodies of human beings. No other animal transmits impurity this way.
That is what makes you so fabulously human.
So even though the Mishnah doesn't explicitly give us any details about the Adnei Hasada, it indirectly tells us something huge, that these creatures are human-like, enough at least that, according to Rabbi Yossi, they have a halachic status that is uniquely human. So that's the first inkling we get that these creatures are something special, something different than regular animals. But the Talmud Yerushalmi gives us even more information in its discussion of that Mishnah. It refers to them as Avnei Hasada with a vase instead of Adnei Hasada, the way we've been saying it with
Interesting.
a daled.
So stones.
There are explanations for both versions of the word, but they're technical and I won't get into it here. But Avnei Hasada is a phrase that comes from Iyov, or Job, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But for now, all we need to know is that Avnei Hasada means the same thing as Adnei Hasada.
No, it doesn't.
Because the Talmud Yerushalmi is clearly talking about that Mishnah. And it tells us that the Avnei Hasada is a barnash de Tur, a mountain man, and its life comes from its navel, and if you cut its navel, it can't live. So this seems to be the earliest source for the idea that the Adnei Hasada are creatures that grow from the ground. But the added details about their eating habits and stuff, and the idea that it's the same thing as the Yadua that's used for magic, that stuff shows up later in the Middle Ages. But this piece from the Talmud Yerushalmi is kind of where all of that starts. And it gives us the term mountain man, which is fun.
Oh, okay. He's a creepy wilderness man. Gotcha.
But what about that source in Iyov that I told you about? After I saw this mention of the Adnei Hasada as the Avnei Hasada, I searched up the verse that phrase comes from, and this is what it says. For you will have a pact with the Avnei Hasada, and the Chayas Hasada will be your allies. Avnei Hasada literally translates as the stones of the field, and Chayas Hasada means the beasts of the field. But according to Rashi, the Avnei Hasada are a type of person. So maybe that's our pumpkin people.
This is the time of year to write to the great pumpkin.
But in his very next commentary on the phrase Chayas Hasada, the beasts of the field, he says that this is not just any beasts of the field, but a particular beast, which he translates into French as grossa or something like that.
Large.
The translations of Rashi here also aren't sure what it means. But he continues and says that this is a true beast of the field, and that in the language of the Mishnah, it's called Adnei Hasada. So according to this, the Avnei Hasada are a type of man, and the Chayas Hasada are the Adnei Hasada. It's a little bit confusing, so let's try to sort through it a little bit. It could be that Rashi's saying that the verse is talking about the same thing, but with two different terms, Avnei Hasada and Chayas Hasada. Or he could be saying that we're talking about two different things, which just so happen to have similar names, Avnei Hasada and Adnei Hasada. And I wasn't able to find any sources that clarified that. But the really interesting thing here is that mystery French word.
Baguette.
According to 𝒒𐃄𐤃 Rashi, which is a modern dictionary of the medieval French words that Rashi sprinkles throughout his commentaries, it says that this word is connected to folk tales about people who turn into wolves. which means, according to this theory, Rashi is saying that the Adnei Hasada are werewolves.
Werewolf for mitzvah, spooky, scary. Boys becoming men, men becoming wolves.
So now we've got two completely different possible definitions of the Adnei Hasada, and both are awesome. Pumpkin people or werewolves. But those aren't the only possibilities. When I was digging around for stuff about the Adnei Hasada, I saw a few English translations that translated it as orangutans, which was weird because that's completely different. At that point, I hadn't seen the werewolf thing yet, and the only definition of Adnei Hasada that I was aware of was the plant people. So I was very surprised to see it translated as something completely different and completely normal, like not a monster. So I dug around, and the source for that translation seems to be Rambam's commentary on that Mishnah about the dead body of the Adnei Hasada making people impure the way that a human body does. But when I looked at it, it doesn't seem like Rambam is talking about an orangutan there. Here's how he describes the Adnei Hasada. He says that they're wild animals that resemble human beings. Okay, that's sounding kind of orangutan-y. But then he continues that there are stories told of them that they speak many words, but it's unintelligible, but their speech is similar to human speech. And then he tells us that in Arabic, it's called al-nasnas, and it's written about extensively in books. So at first I thought maybe it could still be orangutans, and that thing about them having human-like speech was somehow a reference to the possible language abilities of apes. But Rambam actually tells us exactly what he's talking about. Remember that Arabic word, al-nasnas? Turns out that it's a monster that shows up a lot in Arab folklore.
Perhaps you would like to hear the tale?
Just as Rambam said. And then it's a human-like creature that hops around on one leg. Here's a closer look at that picture of them, which is delightful. But it kind of feels like a missed opportunity to draw them in profile where you only see one leg anyways. So now we've got three possibilities for the Adnei Hasada. Pumpkin people, werewolves, and monopods. But let's not completely rule out apes.
Nobody wants me.
Malbim mentions the Adnei Hasada in a different context that I'm not going to get into here, but he says that according to Rambam, they are the forest man, which is either the orangutan or the chimpanzee. Now, I think it's worth noting that the word orangutan comes from two words that actually mean forest man, which is maybe what Malbim was referring to. But forest man also sounds a lot like field man, which is what Adnei Hasada means, which is an interesting connection for the argument that Adnei Hasada are orangutans.
Okay, I see.
Okay, before we move on from orangutans, I want to talk about one more thing, which is great ape personhood. It's the idea that apes should be considered people and be granted human rights and maybe even the rights of citizenship. Jane Goodall is one of the proponents of this movement, and there have been a lot of legal
rights of citizenship. I mean, you know, I was going to say apes voting. Wait, they're talking about apes, right? Yeah, apes. So I was going to say apes voting. That's insane. But then I realized, oh wait, you know, some of the people that vote. Also, I just want to be clear in case anyone wants to twist this into being a racial thing. No, I just think that generally Americans and people in general, but like especially in America, people get really complacent to the point that they don't know shit about the government or other things. But like, no, this is everybody. This like every race, class, gender, every ideology. Like there's dum-dums and smart people in every group. And unfortunately, certain terms have been used to unfairly, you know, malign specific groups. But at the end of the day, all humans are related to, you know, I mean, all primates are related in one way or another. Not, and people who try to use, you know, those terms. At the end of the day, it's kind of like, it's not that different to when, I'm not going to even, you know, entertain it, but it's not that different to when people, people like try to disparage Jewish people with like, you know, referring to a language of an animal that we're not supposed to eat, in the same way that like, because of that like dumb association that racists make, it's like, oh, well, you know, this one people is from this one continent, and again, super reductive, but and then they look at it and say, oh, well, this animal, we've only encountered it on this continent, therefore we're going to associate the two. It's no different than associating Jews with an animal that they can't eat. Or even furthermore, this also happens with Muslims as well, where people will use that same language. So I do wonder, like, I mean, anyway, it's more time than I want to devote to even analyzing bigotry, but I do feel like it's something that's worth addressing just because of the fact that, I don't know, I've spent too much time online and I see the shit that people say, and so I feel like it's at the very least, to deconstruct it, not harmful. It's just one thing that I feel like obviously I'd hope that nobody watching my channel would think like that, but unfortunately just being exposed to the internet, it's the type of thing where it's I don't know. Honestly, some people I'm convinced they don't even realize how offensive the shit they can say is. And I think what's worse is some people don't care. But at the end of the day, it's, anyway, I'm just kind of talking in circles at this point. But no, I do think that at the end of the day, in all seriousness, probably not a good idea to give them the rights to vote. But in terms of protections, I think that's totally justified.
I kind of shorthand some of what you're saying to basically, we are the planet of the apes. That's what we're living through.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, what they're talking about with the creature, I'm hearing lots of echoes of Esau and Edom. Basically, wilderness people, hairiness, animalistic people. And I'm hearing echoes of that one. Again, I don't think that's where they're going with it, but I'm hearing echoes of it. Tag.
I mean, I see where you're coming from, though I don't necessarily agree, just because that really only exists insofar as the parallelism that exists between Jacob and Esau, and that could be compared to Gilgamesh and Enkidu. But I see where you're coming from. I just think within the internal narrative, it would be more fitting to compare it to the other people that were around at the time of Adam that were also, people, but they weren't, they weren't Ben Adam, they weren't children of Adam.
Well, if you're going that route, then what pops into mind is always the Gudians, who brought about the end of the Akkadian Empire. Hey.
Interesting. How do you connect that?
Well, they were mountain people, wilderness people. They were referred to as looking like dogs. And they were basically no civilization. They were just like raiders kind of thing. They came from the from the east rather than the west. The Amorites were from the west. They came from the eastern mountains. The Zagros.
Interesting. What does it mean for someone to look like a dog? I mean, imagine it's you know how there's some people who they have the same hairstyles as their dogs.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things they specifically ask about with the Gudians. It's just what did they mean by that they looked like dogs?
Yeah. But no, I was, oh my God, I mean, I'm not going to go into it because it's not relevant, but there are some people who not that they look like dogs, but there's dogs that look like specific people. And I honestly, I think probably the funniest ones are about celebrities, because then it's something that everyone can kind of commonly agree or disagree on. But anyway.
So are you trying to say they're trying to breed a dog that looks like, say, Donald Trump? I don't like that idea.
Yeah, I don't like that idea either. But you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if, oh God, someone's probably trying to do it.
Oh, I'm sure there are people out there doing things much stupider, but that's pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
Hey.
It's of citizenship. Jane Goodall is one of the proponents of this movement, and there have been a lot of legal efforts to codify this into law in various places.
This is very challenging to some people who want to cling to the fact that only humans can be persons. They're more like us than anything else. They deserve to be treated with respect.
But according to the opinion that Adnei Hasada are orangutans, then our Mishnah about the body of the Adnei Hasada having the same unique halacha as the body of a human being would be the earliest legal ruling giving apes the status of people, at least in one very specific way, which I think is fun. So now we've got 4 possibilities for the identity of the Adnei Hasada: pumpkin people, werewolves, monopods, and orangutans. Okay, let's get back to the pumpkin people.
How's it hanging? I'm David Pumpkins.
the guys that are tethered to the ground by their umbilical cord and eat anything in its radius. The Tiferes Yisrael, in his commentary on that Mishnah, discusses this possibility and ultimately rejects it in favor of orangutans.
They were orangutans, hard-working, patriotic orangutans.
But before he gets there, he mentions some possible problems with the pumpkin people that he says aren't really a problem. So he asks questions and then answers them so that he can get to his main problem and then not answer it. So here's one of those questions that he asks and answers. He says, you shouldn't be bothered by the fact that such a creature isn't mentioned in history books, because there are many creatures who were lost to history, but their bones have been discovered in the depths of the earth, such as the mammoth. So he proposes it could be that because these plant monster people were so dangerous, ancient humans deliberately drove them to extinction. So according to this, maybe there are Adnei Hasada bones buried in the earth. But I wouldn't go looking for them because I might be tempted to use them for magic. Okay, so in that commentary from the Tiferes Yisrael, while he's talking about how dangerous these creatures are described, he mentions a book called 𝒒𐄃 looking for them because I might be tempted to use them for magic. Okay, so in that commentary from the Tiferes Yisrael, while he's talking about how dangerous these creatures are described, he mentions a book called 𝒒𐄃, which I hadn't heard of before. So I did some digging and discovered that it's a Jewish science text published in the early 1700s, and apparently it's famous for this illustration of human anatomy compared to a house. I had never seen that before, and even though it's not related to our topic, I thought it was really cool and I wanted to share it with you. I particularly like how the house has a face. Anyways, in 𒒒𐄃, there's a section where he's discussing the Adnei Hasada as the scary plant monster people. And he mentioned some of the sources we looked at earlier, but then he offers another possibility. He says that there's a new geography book which tells of creatures from the province of Sambulala in Tartary. He refers to the people of Tartary as African, but Tartary is actually in Asia and includes Siberia. Anyways, he says this creature grows from seeds like pumpkin seeds, but smaller, which sprout vines or cords that grow to the navel of an animal called the baramets, which means sheep in their language, because it looks exactly like a sheep from head to toe. It has cloven hooves, soft skin, and wool that's good for making clothes. It doesn't have horns, but the hair on its head grows into the shape of horns. And the sheep can grow to about half an amma or taller, which is about 9 inches. Then he continues, according to the people who have seen this creature, its meat tastes like fish and its blood is as sweet as honey. It lives as long as there's grass within reach of its vine, and if the grass is cut or dies out, the animal also dies. And finally, one more detail, it has no natural predators except for the wolf, which is always trying to eat it. So this is very exciting, a sheep that grows on a vine. And I'm simultaneously delighted by and disturbed by the imagery of this poor thing running around in circles trying to get away from a wolf. But while I was digging around trying to find out what Tartary is, I found out that this creature is actually pretty well known and even has its own Wikipedia page. It's called the Vegetable Lamb of Tartary, and there are lots of wonderful images of what people thought it looked like. That Wikipedia page also taught me a new word, zoophyte, which means a half-plant, half-animal creature. So now we've got 5 possibilities for what the Adnei Hasada are. Pumpkin people, werewolves, monopods, orangutans, and vegetable lambs. 2 of which are zoophytes. Okay, so there's one more thing about the Adnei Hasada that I was kind of on the fence about including. There's an idea in Kabbalah, and it comes up a few times in Hasidus as well, that the Adnei Hasada are the mamutza, the intermediary or bridge between plant and animal. They're animals because they can move around and eat and stuff, but they're also kind of plants because they're connected to the ground and are nourished through their umbilical cord vine.
That's not how umbilical cords work.
And that's an interesting idea, but I wasn't sure if it fit until I saw a tiny little footnote from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. But before I share that, let me give you a little background. There's a verse later in the Torah, in Devarim or Deuteronomy, that's talking about war, and it says that when you conquer a city, you shouldn't cut down trees. And it asks rhetorically, Ki ha'adam eitz hasada, is a tree a person? In other words, the people are the enemy, not the trees, which is a fascinating concept on its own, and maybe we'll get into it more when we get there. But what's relevant here is that the Talmud uses this verse literally to learn how human beings are like trees. And this is something that's very popular to quote on Tu B'Shvat, the New Year for trees. Anyways, the Rebbe asked about the way that the Talmud compares people to trees, and that it's different than the way people are compared to other things in other places, and he asks what's so special about this comparison. I'm not going to get into the whole question and answer because, like I said, this is about the footnote. So I'm just going to share the part that gets us there. The Rebbe starts talking about what the unique positive quality of plants is as compared to animals and human beings. And he says that the unique quality of plants is that they don't hide the fact that their life force comes from the ground. Ultimately, everything, even animals and people, get their life from the ground, but with plants, it's out in the open. They're tethered to the ground, and if you take them out, they die. But animals and humans aren't connected to their source physically, so they don't overtly illustrate that connection. And that's where the footnote comes in. The Rebbe points out this idea that the Adnei Asada are the intermediary between plants and animals. And that's it. That's the entire footnote, which at first I thought was kind of uneventful. I was doing a search for Adnei Asada. This came up. I thought maybe there would be something interesting there. And then I saw it and thought maybe it wasn't so interesting. The Adnei Asada are mentioned there, but it doesn't seem to be anything new or exciting. But then I thought that this actually kind of undermines the point that the Rebbe is trying to make, that plants have something that animals and people don't have. But then he gives us an example of an animal that does have that quality, which isn't rare. There's a lot of instances where the Rebbe points out things that could contradict a point that he's making, and sometimes he'll explain why it doesn't, and other times he'll just leave it there. So maybe this footnote could be that. But then it occurred to me that there's a way that the Adnei Asada actually makes the point even stronger. See, this idea of a mamutza, a bridge or an intermediary between two things, the way it works in Kabbalah is that it has to have the best of both things. That's the only way it can be a real bridge between the two. Which means that when it says that the Adnei Asada are the bridge between plants and animals, it doesn't just mean that it's a link in the chain that gets us one step closer. It means it's got the unique strengths of an animal and the unique strengths of a plant. It's an animal, so it can move around and do all sorts of things that plants can't do, but it's also a plant in that it's connected to the ground and openly illustrates its connection to its source of life, which animals can't do. And that's really cool to me because up until that point, I had been thinking about the pumpkin people's umbilical vine as a limitation. It can only graze within the limitations of its vine, and also the vine is a vulnerability. If it gets severed, the creature dies. And in the case of the vegetable lamb version of this creature, it makes it difficult for it to run away from wolves. So that seems like a limitation and a vulnerability. But that footnote made me think about it as a strength. In one particular way, and maybe even in the most important way, the pumpkin people's umbilical vine makes them even better than animals or even than human beings. All right, that's it. That's the rabbit hole. Just a reminder again, if you like this style of exploring Torah and you'd like to try doing it yourself, go to creativejudaism.com/DIY and sign up for the DIY rabbit hole course. Thank you for following me down the rabbit hole. Be careful not to step on any plants down here. The plants might be animals.
Interesting. I think he built a pretty good case for them being werewolf pumpkin people. Because you got the werewolf side of the animal, then you have the pumpkin people side of the plant. And
Don't forget the orangutan.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was trying to combine a couple of them. I can't quite the orangutans in there as well. Maybe orangutans.
That could work. So,
yeah.
What do you think about the idea of the umbilical cord that tethers it actually being mycelium, and that it's like a vegetable in that it needs to be connected to its source, but at the same time it's capable of moving around?
No, that's an interesting one. What was jumping out to me was much more of the esoteric, sort of the idea of the astral cord connecting the body and soul.
Interesting.
Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Parshah Kedoshim, beginning in chapter 19 of the book of Leviticus. Our portion opens with a command, and Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, "Speak to the entire congregation of the children of Israel and say to them, 'You shall be holy, for I, Hashem your God, am holy.'" This portion is so important, and its message is so crucial that it was given over to the entire nation men, women, and children in assembly. Unlike some other instances in which the teaching of the mitzvot were given over to the people through the tribal heads, Moshe here gathered together the entire nation at once to teach them these commandments. And they're not addressed to an individual, but to the entire nation as a whole, as a community. They're meant to be kept together. Our opening verse instructs Israel to be holy as Hashem is holy. You shall be holy, for I, Hashem your God, am holy. But what does that even mean? And what is it all about? How is it done? How can people be expected to be holy like God? What's the connection between the holiness required of Israel and the holiness of Hashem? So the adjective holiness is generally defined as dedicated or consecrated to God or a religious purpose, sacred. People tend to think of the concept of holiness as being quite a lofty level, worthy to strive towards, but unattainable to most. The Torah teaches that holiness is not a mystical concept, but something very tangible. In this regard, the Torah's definition of holy really conveys the idea of being set apart, of being separate. God is totally unique and incomparable to anything else in this world. And yet, even though God is separate from the world, he's not disconnected from it, but he's found within the world. So is it possible for people to be holy, but still to be part of this world? And it's intriguing that the verse emphasizes that this is one of the few portions of Torah which was given over to all of Israel at once, men, woman, and child, in assembly. A call to the entire nation with no exception. Speak to the entire congregation of the children of Israel and tell them, you shall be holy, for I, Hashem your God, am holy. This is the deepest idea in the world, so open up your heart. Torah is here declaring that this goal to be holy is required of each person, and therefore, if it's something that's required, that means that it is within reach for every individual to achieve. Since the portion begins with this call for holiness, it would follow that the key to understanding the practical definition of holiness must be outlined by what follows, that the holiness God requires of all of Israel is manifest in the following commandments. So an examination of our Parsha should enlighten us as to the nature of holiness. Our portion of Kedoshim is full of commandments. It features 51 in all. Now, some of these commandments are of the type known as ben adam lamakom. That means commandments that are a concern to God alone. These includes prohibitions against idolatry and the forbidden mixtures, the commandment of Shabbat, reverence for the temple, and rules pertaining to the sacred offerings, agricultural laws that are applicable in the land of Israel, laws against following the idolatrous ways of the nations, such as Moloch and sorcery and magical practices, and more. We also find here commandments of the category known as ben adam lechavero, mitzvot that apply between man and his fellow, such as loving one's neighbor as oneself and reverence for parents, prohibitions against stealing and all forms of cheating, against making a false oath, against vengeance, against falsehood and talebearing, the commandment to rebuke one's fellow and to honor the aged, mitzvot concerned with social justice, such as the obligation to pay a worker on time and not to place any sort of stumbling block, never to take a bribe, loving the convert, the obligation to use honest weights and measures and engage in honest business practices and to help the other in a time of distress, and more. All told, our portion of Kedoshim showcases a wide variety of commandments, and the common thread that binds them all together is that they're all included in the framework of that very first verse, the call to be holy. The thing is, when it comes to one's private relationship with God and the fulfillment of those mitzvot that are ben adam lamakom, that are only of concern to the Creator, when it's a question of religiosity that's not based on interaction with others, so one could easily feign piety and convince oneself that he's truly serving God, even if it's all in his own head. Who's going to check? But the other type of mitzvot, the divine commandments of the category known as ben adam lechavero, between man and his fellow man, observing these properly is a lot harder, more difficult, a much greater challenge than keeping those commandments that are of concern only between man and God alone. It's easy to be pious when it's just me and God. And at the same time, to be exploitive, God forbid, or manipulative, or just plain nasty to my fellow man. As the celebrated American cartoonist Charles M. Schulz's character Linus said in the classic comic strip Peanuts, I love mankind. It's just people I can't stand. So open up your heart in the deepest way. Hashem loves people. So Torah measures what it means to be holy like him by how we treat others. And honestly, how we treat others is what matters the most. We can act really pious and be very scrupulous when it comes to things that have nothing to do with social interaction. But the only true and accurate measure of a person is how he or she treats others. Among the mitzvot, which focuses on relationships and how the other should be treated, our Parsha features the famous command, and you shall love your fellow as yourself. The Talmud relates the story of a heathen who came before the great sage Hillel and said, convert me on the condition that you teach me the entire Torah while standing on one foot. Hillel stood on one foot and replied, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That's the whole Torah. All the rest is commentary. Go and study it. And years later, the revered and truly holy teacher, Rabbi Akiva, famously said about this verse, this is a major principle of the Torah. In order to fulfill all these commandments of proper behavior between man and his fellow man, one is required to be very much involved with this world. These are mitzvot that they can't be accomplished through prayer or meditation. They can't be fulfilled by living separated from the world, by living an ascetic life. Yet they do require separation from the world in a certain sense, in the sense of not allowing oneself to be influenced by other people's evil ways, in the sense of not wanting to have anything to do with what most people define as proper behavior, in the sense that this world is overrun by corruption and selfishness and violence. That's what we have to be separate from, and yet remain very much in this world. And that indeed is a great challenge. But Torah's goal is not for people to remain aloof from society. The person whom Torah considers as living a holy lifestyle is not one who isolates in a tower so that he or she will not be bothered or tempted by the world. Neither does Torah define holiness as one who engages in bold acts of piety and self-denial. Holiness is not about extreme actions of piety which cause a person to separate from life, but the opposite. The more a person is involved with others and yet conducts himself justly, the holier the Torah would consider that person to be. The holy person is the one who is actively guided by Torah in everything, and thus is not afraid to be involved with every aspect of this very human life, to be a part of and to contribute to the betterment of human society right here in the very midst of this world. And this person operates out of a desire to reveal the godliness in every area of life. So, we've been talking about emulating God and striving to be holy like him, and we're attempting to define what that holiness can mean in a practical sense. But just as it is easy to have misconceptions about what holiness means, well, how much more so when speaking about God, it's even easier to have misconceptions about God himself. So notice something amazing. Just as soon as our portion opens, immediately following those most basic and most fundamental instructions of revering one's parents and observing the Shabbat, but prior to commencing the enumeration of all of the portion's many commandments, verse 4 tells us, do not turn to idols, and molten gods you shall not make for yourselves. I am Hashem your God. What is the significance of this warning, and why does it appear here? So open up your heart in the very deepest way. Just as true holiness needs to be measured by deed and integrity in relationships, because otherwise it could just be a figment of the imagination altogether, it can be totally in our heads, just like we can invent an idea of holiness which is nothing but a product of our own imagination, so too, we can invent God according to our own imagination. An all too human tendency is to try and lower God to our level, to a level of our convenience and comfort zone. In his commentary on this verse, the great Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch relates firstly to the beginning of the verse, do not turn to idols. He explains that the idolatrous perception of godliness lowers divinity to the level of an image created by humans, as was the case of the golden calf. Torah's truth demands the very opposite. Humans must elevate themselves and reach up towards God by shaping our entire human existence according to the will of God. Contrary to the idolatrous notion that intermediaries are needed between man and his God, Torah maintains that the relationship between God and man is direct. The most fundamental Torah truth is that man has free access to God directly without the necessity of any intermediary, and that the one and only condition for connecting with God is acting in obedience to him. In Rabbi Hirsch's words, do not entertain the vain thought that by making an image, you'll have it in your power to decree about the deity that it shall come down to you. But rather, it is incumbent upon you to elevate yourself to your God by shaping your entire human existence according to his will. He explains that the commandments demonstrate that man is capable of elevating himself to a covenantal relationship with God, and that when man, in his entire human existence, ascends to the proximity of God without any intermediaries, all of nature ascends with him. Rav Hirsch explains that according to the etymological analysis of the Hebrew, the word Elilim, meaning idols, can best be understood as what he calls powers of denial, because the heathen conception honors their gods primarily because they fear them as hostile powers. Left to himself, he writes, man always feels limited and even at war with higher powers, powers whose tolerance must be forced or flattered or cajoled out of them, because otherwise they will deny man his wishes. This worldview is a product of the heathen gods and their cults, but even today, such a twisted view leads minds which have become estranged from the Jewish true conception of God, leads them into the arms of heathen illusions and practices. Rabbi Hirsch says this verse warns us not to allow such ideas to confuse our thoughts of God. But then the verse continues, okay, do not turn to idols. And then it says, and do not make yourselves gods, molten gods for yourselves. What are these molten gods? The Hebrew word masecha is here translated as molten, meaning poured out, cast images. The word's root, the two letters samach chet, is related to the word nasoch, pouring. So the verse conveys the idea, do not form gods for yourself, poured out in some form,
Maybe
like
it's
the golden
talking
calf
about
carved in
gods
Exodus
that
32,
you pour out
a
wine
molten
to.
calf, and like the verse in Isaiah 42:17, those who say to molten idols, you are our gods. These are imaginary gods, poured out, meaning, open up your heart. Why does Torah call them poured out? They're manufactured to suit the needs and comfort zone of man. So the Elilim, the idols first mentioned in the verse, are the gods as they are imagined to be, and Elohim Masecha, the molten gods, are their molded representation. And as Rabbi Hirsch teaches, this is the sin of subjectivity. Cast idols are figures which at any desired moment can be remolded to any shape or form to suit the needs and expectations of one's imagination. But it's man who's created in the image of God, not the other way around. The deepest truth is that Torah's use of this word masecha here in this verse is even more amazing, because in addition to the idea it conveys of molten, of a pouring out, the word masecha also means a mask. It's also related to the word masach, meaning a cover or a covering or a divider. A mask covers over and also separates the wearer from everyone else. This is how the word is used in Exodus 36:37. For the entrance of the tent, he made a screen. And Isaiah 22:8 states, he uncovered the screen of Judah. And in Isaiah 25, we find the word masecha used as the masks that cover all the nations. So perhaps we can understand, do not make gods of masecha, to also convey the idea, do not make a masked God in the sense of a covering. Don't attempt through your subjective representation to cover over the true nature of God, who is existence itself, life itself. Do not allow your actions to make a divider between you and God. Do not separate yourself from who he really is by bringing him down to a material level that is no longer godly, by covering this true God with a stylized God made to order on your terms that you make to fit within your expectation, within your comfort zone, which is nothing but a reflection of yourself. These thoughts are all so apropos during these days of Sefirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, as we focus on our midot, our character traits, addressing the needs of fixing our true spiritual essence by addressing those areas of our lives in which our behavior is lacking, and by striving to emulate the divine attributes and truly realign our relationship with God according to his terms, not ours. The true holiness sought by our portion, characterized by concern for others and proper conduct, is so missing from the world today. We live in a time when the divine image in which man was created is trampled upon daily. Parshat Kedoshim reminds us that the meaning of what it is to be holy is to be part of this world by living as a caring, just, compassionate, responsible society, to be a part of this world by amplifying its beauty through acts of kindness and righteousness, heeding Hashem's call to be holy as he is holy. Thank you for watching this week's Jerusalem Lights Torah portion. May we all grow stronger in the calling and commitment to live lives of holiness. And may Hashem's light grow even stronger in this world through our obedience to that divine call. Shabbat Shalom.
Interesting. You have any thoughts on that?
I agree with his take about, the idea of you don't want the molten God, because when you pour it in, it takes the shape of the form that you're pouring into. And that's the shape of what the human is. Like, it's basically the human can't limit God sort of concept. And no, I do like the one quote about, the penis quote about loving everybody. I put a different spin on it as, I love people. There are some people I love a little more when there's an ocean between us. Tag.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to think the context in which this can. Yeah, I don't know when I said this. Oh no, I remember now. It was with Glenn Klotz. But no, it's like the joke. May God bless and keep the Tsar far away from us.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because, like, bless, may God bless and keep you. Like that's actually a motif. But then it's like the keep him far away from us. Anyway.
And keep him busy with senseless things to do.
Yep. So, also for context, why there's so much of it in my recommended, I've been watching the Fallout series on Amazon Prime. It's pretty good. So I've been also watching other content on Fallout. You ever play that?
Yeah, I think I played some of Fallout 3.
Oh, cool. Let's see. So, also speaking of the Sphere Mary, before I forget, let's see. Alright. Side by side. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher hagidshanu memitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat haomer hayom shena let me start over because it was on the wrong one. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher hagidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer Hayom echad v'esrim yom shem shelosha shavuot laomer Harachaman hu yachazir lanu Avodat Beit HaMikdash Limkoma Bimhera B'Yameinu Amen Selah Nimenatzeach B'Neginot מזמור שיר אלוהים יחננו, וירבה יברכנו, יאר פניו איתנו, סלע לדף בארץ דרכך, וכל גויים ישועתך, יודוך עמים אלוהים יודוך, עמים כולם ישמחו, ישמחו, וירננו לאומים כי תשפוט עמים ישור, ולאומים בארץ תנחם, סלע. יודוך עמים אלוהים יודוך עמים כולם, ארץ נתנה יבולה, יברכנו אלוהים אלוהינו, יברכנו אלוהים ויראו אותו כל אפסי הארץ. ענה וכוח גדולת ימינך, תתצרו רק חברינך, עמך סגבנו, טהרנו נורא, נגיבור דורשי ייחודך, כתבת שומרם ברכם טהרם, רחמי צדקתך תמיגום להם, חסין קדוש ברוב טובך נהל דתך, יחיד גאה למכוון, זוכרנו קדושתך, שבתנו קבל, ושמעת צעקתנו יודע, תלומות. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ריבונו של עולם, אתה ציוותנו על ידי משה עבדך, לספור ספירת העומר, כדי לטהרנו מקליפותינו מתמותינו, כמו שכתבת בתורתך, וספרתם לכם ממחרת השבת מיום אביכם את עומר התנופה 7 שבתות תמימות תהיינה עד ממחרת השבת השביעית תספרו 50 יום כדי שיתרעו נפשות עמך ישראל מזוהמתם, ובכן יהי רצון מלפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שבזכות ספירת העומר שספרתי היום, יתוקן מה שפגמתי בספיר המלכות שבתפארת, וטהר ואתקדש בקדושה של מעלה, ועל ידי זה יושפע שפע רב בכל העולמות, ולתקן את נפשותינו ורוחותינו ונשמותינו מכוסי גוף גם, ולטהרנו ולקדשנו מקדושתך העליונה. Amen. Selah. Oh God, that was really stretching my voice. But yeah, okay, so that has been 3 weeks of the Omer. That is wild. 3 weeks. This is I wish I could get more into it like consciously, but honestly, it's I don't know. It's like, it's difficult, especially in summer, because I'm not around a lot of people, and that's kind of when a lot of my thoughts come to me. Otherwise, I just kind of wake up late as usual. But anyway, we will start in a moment. I just want to find something about this. Something else about Kedoshim. Let's see. This could be good.
I come from a generation of Jews who assumed that synagogue worship consisted largely of middle-aged ladies with badly dyed blue hair standing outside the synagogue and almost kissing each other on the cheek while saying, "Lovely to see you too, dear." Now, concluding that this was the sum total of Judaism and finding that this particular mode of worship somewhat lacking, large numbers of my generation hightailed it off to the Himalayas, where they're currently watching their navels and waiting for something to happen. Well, I have news for them. Nothing happens when you watch your navel except getting a stiff neck. Then again, we always were a stiff-necked people. About those blue-haired ladies, though, they made a mistake. They failed to notice that lying dormant under those blue rinses was a kind of spirituality about which we could not even guess. How many Jewish jokes start with the phrase, "Eat, he never eats"? The caricature Jewish mother complains continually that her offspring are dying of hunger, in spite of the fact that their daily calorie intake would support a thoroughbred racehorse. Behind every joke, however, there lies a truth. It may be a distorted truth, but a truth nevertheless. Judaism is unique in that it views the body neither as an enemy nor as a bacchanalian banquet, as a resource. The body is not only capable of spiritual elevation, but it's created for this purpose. Bacchanalian banquet, but rather as a resource. The body is not only capable of spiritual elevation, but it's created for this purpose. The body's deepest satisfaction comes from being correctly used in the service of the soul. In this week's Torah portion, God says to Moshe, "Speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel and say to them, 'You shall be holy, for I, Hashem, your God, am holy.'" Since God instructed Moshe to speak to the entire assembly, We know that this commandment was to be spoken in public to all the Jewish people together, not just to Moshe or to Aaron and Moshe. Why? What is it about the command to be holy that requires that it be communicated to everybody together? The answer is that the holiness that the Torah seeks from us is not a holiness of separation, denial, monasticism, and seclusion. Rather, the Torah is a Torah of holiness that's to be lived in an assembly, a holiness where the body is elevated by the soul and where its greatest potential is only realized in our interaction with our fellow human beings.
There's an expression.
Oh.
I'm not who I think I am.
You can go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I took away what he was trying to say about the way that it was committed. It was taught to everyone is the idea of public rules, public laws. And it's the idea that everybody knows all of the same rules and everybody's committed to them. And that's kind of echoed in some of like the old, law stealies that they used to put up. Okay.
Yeah, I see. Wednesday. Also, happy 420. All right, sorry about that.
I am not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. What's remarkable is that this applies to what we think Hashem, God Almighty, thinks of us as well. So what is the Torah telling us to think that Hashem thinks of us? We're going to find out in this week's Torah portion. So let's look at the beginning of this week's Parsha. Actually, this week is a double Parsha. It's 𝒒𐒃 and Kedoshim, but we're going to look at the beginning of the second Parsha, Parshah Kedoshim. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Dabel kol adas b'nei Yisrael, speak to the entire congregation of the Jewish people. V'amarta lehem, say to them, Kedoshim tiyu, you should be holy, ki kodesh ani, Hashem Elokeichem, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. You should be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Okay, so Rashi is always our go-to when we want to understand what's going on the most simple level. So, Dabel kol adas b'nei Yisrael, speak to the entire nation of the Jewish people. What does it mean, the entire nation of the Jewish people? Malamid, this teaches us shenemra parsha zu, that this section of the Torah that we're about to read here was read or stated publicly behakel, at the Hakel gathering. Hakel is every 7 years there was a gathering, a mass gathering. The entire Jewish people, man, women, and child, would come together to Jerusalem, to the Holy Temple, and the king Torah scroll, and they would relive the awe of the Sinai experience. And he continues, and he says, Mipnei sheroiv gufei Torah tloyin ba, because the majority of the, literally, body of Torah, but the body of Torah meaning the obligations of Torah law, tloyin ba, are dependent upon it. Okay, so this is what Rashi says, that these passages at the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, they were read when? At Hakel, when the entire nation gathered. Why? Because the majority, Roiv means the majority of Torah, depends upon these passages. Okay. So, a couple of questions. First of all, what does it mean that the majority of the Torah is dependent on these passages? It's true that Kedoshim is a parsha with a lot of mitzvahs. It does have a lot of mitzvahs, but it's not the majority of mitzvahs. It's not even the parsha that has the most mitzvahs. Maybe you could translate it that way. Roiv doesn't mean the most, doesn't mean the majority of mitzvahs. Maybe it just means the most, but it's not even. 𤒒𐃃 has the most mitzvahs. So what does it mean that the majority of Torah is dependent on these passages? And along with this question, why does Rashi say that? So let's roll with the idea that the majority of Torah is dependent on these passages, but how does that allow us to conclude that it would therefore have been read at Hakel? By the way, we should mention that this year, 5783, is a Hakel year, because the way it works is the year after Shemitah, the sabbatical year, which is a 7-year cycle, is Hakel year. So last year, 5782, was a sabbatical year, and this year, 5783, is a Hakel year. So, yeah, a couple of technical questions here. Why does Rashi say that the majority of the Torah is dependent on these passages here, and why does that lead him to conclude that it must have been read at the massive Hakel gathering? Okay. Did you ever hear of the Rosenthal effect? You heard of the Rosenthal effect? You know who Rosenthal was? He was a Jewish guy. Yeah, surprise, yeah. And he was a psychologist, a Jewish psychologist. Who'd have imagined such a thing exists? Yeah. So Rosenthal was a Jewish psychologist. He is the namesake of the Rosenthal effect. The Rosenthal effect is something that he theorized about, and he tested, and he verified, and that was a semi-famous experiment. Maybe if I tell you the experiment, you'll say, that's the Rosenthal effect. I didn't know it was called Rosenthal effect. They took a public school in California, and they administered a standardized test to the entire school, same test. And then they got back the results, and they randomly selected a certain percentage of the students, not based on their test results, just randomly. And they told the teachers of these students, these kids who were randomly selected, they didn't tell them they were randomly selected. They told them that their test results indicate that these particular students are going to intellectually and academically blossom this year. Now, there was no indication that that would happen. It was completely randomly chosen, but this was what they were testing. They were testing what would happen if the teachers thought that these kids were going to have a big intellectual growth spurt. So at the end of the academic year, what do? They went and they gave the same standardized test again. And what happened? The children who were labeled as in for a big intellectual growth spurt ended up actually having that intellectual growth spurt, and they all did incomparably better than, there's a certain amount of growth that everybody has over the year, but they grew incomparably more than their peers. And what was the reason? The reason was because the teachers looked at the students that way. They assumed that the students had that capacity, and then it sort of came true. Became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's the Rosenthal effect. Dr. Robert Rosenthal and the Rosenthal effect. So I'll tell you, Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, also speaks about the Rosenthal effect. King Solomon was a little bit before Rosenthal. There's a verse in Mishlei, in Proverbs. If you want to look it up, it's chapter 9, verse 8. And it says, Al toichach leitz, don't rebuke or reprove or criticize a leitz. A leitz is a scoffer. Pen yisno eko, lest he hate you for it. Hoichach lechochim, rebuke or reprove or criticize a wise person, ve'yehaveko, and he will love you. He'll love you for it. So the simple meaning is what it sounds like, that it's talking about two different types of people and how they respond to criticism. So the scoffer becomes spiteful. If you criticize him, now you're his enemy and he wants to get you. And the wise man, he knows how to take criticism. He actually embraces criticism and he'll thank you for it. And that's on one level, one of the meanings. But as we know, every Torah verse has layers and layers and layers of meaning. So a deeper reading of this verse, according to the Shalah HaKodesh, is that it's not talking about two different people or two different types of people and how they respond to criticism. It's talking about two different approaches to criticism, meaning you can criticize one person two different ways. You can criticize that person looking at them as a dummy, or you can look at them as a wise person, and you're going to get vastly different reactions depending on how you approach them. So the Shalah reads the verse, Al toichach leitz, when you rebuke someone, don't rebuke him as if he's a scoffer, pen yisno eko, lest he come to hate you for it. Meaning he's going to feel that rejection. He's going to feel the negativity, and he's going to mirror it back to you, and he's going to reject the criticism. Rather, when you have to criticize him as a wise person. Look at him, presume that he's a wise person. Think well of him, have a favorable opinion of him. Criticize him as somebody who is all around a good person who wants to do well, and maybe he just missed one little detail by accident, and you say, oh, you're a wise person, so I just wanted to point out something to you. This is out of character for you. You're such a wise person. Then, he will love you. So really, this is the same as the Rosenthal effect, that the way that you approach somebody, the way that you imagine them to be, or the image that you project upon them, assumptions that you make about them, are very powerful. It's very powerful. So, I mean, it hardly seems fair that other people have that power, that if they think well of us, it'll cause us to rise to the occasion. And conversely, if they think poorly of us, it actually can cause us to underperform. It doesn't seem fair, but a lot of things in life don't seem fair. And I guess that's one of them, that it really does have an effect. And this is just talking about any person talking to any other person. How much more so if you're talking about an influential relationship, like a parent who looks down at a child, who thinks poorly of a child, who doesn't like, God forbid, their own child. So that really initiates a vicious cycle where it causes the child to become, to behave worse and worse. And conversely, if you assume good things about the child, or a teacher assumes good things about a student, then that becomes the reality. So it's a real thing. It's not just flattery. Like, if I want somebody to do me a favor, so I'm going to call him a nice guy, because there it's like you call him a nice guy and you flatter him, so that he'll do something for you that he could have done, but maybe he would have opted not to do it. Like, can you take me to the airport? You're such a nice guy. He could have told me no, but since I called him a nice guy, so maybe he'll be willing to do something that he would have said no, but even if he said no, he could have done it. He just chose not to do it. This is different. This is not just flattery. This is getting somebody to be able to do something that they previously weren't able to do. They actually weren't able to do it. So it's not just buttering somebody up so that they'll do something for you that they're able to do, but they might choose not to do. This is actually triggering some type of a growth in the person where they become more capable because of assumptions that you make about them. I once saw on a refrigerator magnet. I looked it up again because I thought it was a poignant quote. I mean, I could pretend that I read Winnie the Pooh, but I'm not going to pretend. I'm not. Why should I? I don't have to impress anybody here. I saw on a refrigerator magnet. I'm assuming it's a quote from Winnie the Pooh because there was a picture of Winnie the Pooh. Anyways, so yeah, Winnie the Pooh is sort of like this silly character. He's a bear, and Christopher Robin is his friend, and Christopher Robin's his little boy who hangs out with Winnie the Pooh, and Winnie the Pooh's always getting in trouble, like trying to eat the honey and the bees come and sting.
Did they get in trouble together in a garden? Because we have a friend who would like have a field day with that.
I don't know. I was just thinking about the similarities between Winnie and Yogi, with Yogi wanting all the picnic baskets and such.
Oh, really? You weren't thinking about the Jesus and the boy?
No. I was stuck on the bear part. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no. It just shows that you haven't been as you haven't you probably haven't listened to. No, it's just I don't know. I see patterns, and so now it's like I can't unhear that. You know, Winnie Pooh,
no.
boy.
Oh, I know. I hear you. Sometimes you can't unsee what you've seen. You might want to, but you can't.
Yep. It's like my eyes, my eyes. What did I just?
You could look up what happens to Winnie the Pooh, but at any rate, no. But this is the part that I.
Well, he's out of trademark now, at least the original form. So, so now he's been turned into like a serial killer in some movie or something. I haven't seen it. It looks shitty, but hey, if you like horror movies and you like Winnie the Pooh, why not?
Looked up because as I saw.
What?
Wasn't that Five Nights at Freddy's?
No. There's actually a movie exactly what I just described.
Okay. Oh, I know they had done some of that with Mickey Mouse earlier, so yeah.
Wait, that specific type of thing, or just the
Steamboat? The Steamboat Willie went into public domain earlier this year. Yep.
Oh yeah.
As I told you, I saw this on a refrigerator magnet, and I found it rather poignant. Some of those poignant quotes that I've seen in my life were on refrigerator magnets, and this is one of them. So Christopher Robin, the little boy, tells Winnie the Pooh. This is a really big intro for this quote, but it's a tearjerker. It really is. Okay. He says, Pooh, if there is a tomorrow when we're not together, there's something you must always remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. It's very poignant because the little boy, Christopher Robin, he believes in Winnie the Pooh. And I think then that's the last time that he sees Winnie the Pooh. I think. So, but he leaves Winnie the Pooh with this encouragement. So, at any rate, the point is that we all need a Christopher Robin. We all need to be a Christopher Robin. And that means
we all need to be the little boy. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, let's move on because we are running short on time, and I have a meeting at, let's see, in 9 hours, I think. So I need to get some sleep. So let's see. Wait, what? Let's see, open link in new tab. What is this? is going to be interesting. We'll have to do this sometime. See, watch later. Alright, let's see. Oh, right. Alright, so first of all, we need to find here it is. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. Okay, so we're now looking for, what was it here? Videos. We're on Kedoshim. Alright, so see, it's 20 minutes. Okay, I'm just going to try reading along. Alright.
וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל כל עדת בני ישראל, ואמרת עליהם קדושים תהיו, כי קדוש אני אדוני אלוהיכם. איש עמו ואביו תיראו, ואת שבתותיי תשמורו, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אל תפנו אל האלילים, ואלוהי מסכה לא תעשו לכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. וכי תזבחו זבח של עמים לאדוני לרצונכם, תזבחוהו ביום זבחכם, יאכל וממחרת והנופת עד יום השלישי באש יישרף. ואם האכול יאכל ביום השלישי, פיגול הוא לא ירצה, ויאכל עוונו יישא, כי את קודש אדוני חילל ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה, וקוצרכם את קציר ארצכם לא תכלה, וארצתך לקצור, ולקט קצירך לא תלקט, וכרמך לא תעולה, ופרת כרמך לא תלקט, לעני ולגר תעזוב אותם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. לא תגנובו ולא תכחשו ולא תשקרו, איש בעמיתו, ולא תשבעו בשמי לשקר, וחיללת את שם אלוהיך, אני אדוני. לא תעשוק את רעך ולא תגזול, לא תלין פעולת שכיר איתך עד בוקר, לא תקלל חירש ולפני עיוור לא תיתן מכשול, ויראך מאלוהיך לפניך, אני
אני
אדוני. לא תעשו עוול במשפט, לא תישא פני דל, ולא תהדר פני גדול בסדק, תשפוט עמיתך. לא תלך רכיל בעמך, לא תעמוד על דם רעך, אני אדוני. לא תשנא את אחיך בלבביך, הוכיח תוכיח את עמיתך, ולא תישא עליו חטא. לא תרקום ולא תתפור את בני עמך, ואהבת לרעך כמוך, אני אדוני.
This is such a famous. So, ואהבת לרעך כמוך. This, like, actually know it. Like, I know it more by what it is. Like, I know it more by the Hebrew than I do by the English. But basically, it's this idea of ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, and you are to love your fellow like yourself. Let's see.
I don't know if I want some of those self-loathing people to love me like they love themselves.
Alternatively, I don't. Oh shit. Oh. Well, that could have been worse. Much worse. But now I need to find some shit. What was I going to say? Yeah, alternatively, I don't really know that I want to love other people the same way, exact way that I love myself. You know, gotta keep something special for yourself. Otherwise, you're living in what is it? Brave New World.
Yep. Nope. I agree.
Let me just make sure. Meh. 1 second. Oof, that hurt. It landed on my toe, but it could be a lot worse. Let's see, what can I find about this? Let's see. Oh, this should be good. Yeah, so I heard this guy in.
Say yeah. What do y'all think of 𝒒𐃄𝐵 up here tonight? And what do y'all think about the parents and grandparents?
Ah, come on. It's like it shouldn't be this. It's a basic concept. And I'm also trying to find one that isn't. Whatever.
Here it is, oh, here it is.
Oh God, no, no. Wait, what?
I just made up. Shalom, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stuff I Just Made Up. Today, we're going to learn a song that helps to teach Hillel's golden rule, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now, in this song, we focus on the loving your neighbor part, though there's also room to talk about how do we love ourselves and take care of ourselves. I made this up working with 4- and 5-year-olds on this topic, didn't know what to do, and I thought, what are some situations that they were in they can share their own feelings? So I start by sharing a scenario. I like it when you share your toys with me.
No, I'm sorry. Oh God, why is it so hard to find?
And here I thought she was going to go with an alternate translation of Mishnah, stuff I just made up.
I'm literally struggling. Oh my God. Okay. Here. I was in BBYO. I know they have good songs.
Well, I was going to say she may be onto something. You know, it's just,
yeah.
Hamas and Israel would share their toys with each other. Everything would be fine.
I personally think that Israel should not be sharing their toys with Hamas, but that's just me.
Well, they should share with each other. Yeah. That seems to be what she's saying.
It's a spirit that counts, but, it's kind of like, oh yeah, why doesn't the U.S. military just share with everyone? It's like, yeah, that's a threat to the world.
The spirit counts, but the outcome counts a little more. Tag.
No, they have to. You shall love Adonai, with all your soul, all your mind.
Well, unfortunately, this is the wrong Ve'ahavta.
Teach these words.
I swear.
Well, it's a better song, though.
Oh, it is, but it's not the right one. Oh my God, come on. It should not be this hard. Something tells me I'm not going to find what I'm looking for. Let's see. Search for that again. Maybe something new will come up. Was it this one? What was wrong with this one?
How might our days feel lighter? How could the heart feel? How might the lands get wider if we loved like that? Really loved like that.
not a huge fan of this tune. I don't know what it is. I don't like it personally. Let's see. There's got to. I swear, there's got to be. Is it this one?
Hi there. Let's learn some tefillah.
No, it's not this one either. You know what? I'm going to take the L. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Oh, God. Of course, I should have expected this. There's not... Maybe... Jewish.
Oh, you can't blame Jesus for appropriating a perfectly good saying.
He didn't appropriate anything. He was Jewish.
Well, I know, but it got repackaged into his teachings. I said that's not his fault. He just knew the good stuff to reuse.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. This week's Torah portion, Kedoshim, includes what is probably the most quoted line in the Bible. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. It's a very inspirational and edifying line.
Because if you truly realize there is no difference between your neighbor or yourself, you're all just manifestations of divine energy and ultimately are just puppets on the fingers of the hands of God. It's like that one meme where it's like all the different people are having a conversation and then they're all just little finger puppets on one hand. But obviously much more complex than that. But no, that is one of the ideas, that you should love your fellow as yourself, because there is nothing that really separates you other than this illusory separation which needs to exist in order for the world to function, but that it doesn't truly mean anything besides, the function that it serves. But that doesn't mean that there is some sort of core difference. And that and it's kind of interesting because at the end of the day, you could break anything down into atoms. Like at its very basic, the world is nothing more than just a constantly dynamically changing arrangement of atoms. That's all the universe is in a certain lens.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's just on the flip side, it's really hard to convince yourself that drunk driver rear-ending you is an illusion.
Oh, I'm not saying it's an illusion. What I'm saying is that that there's any actual any actual separation is illusory. Because at the end of the day, in 200 years, both you and that drunk driver are going to be worm food.
Yeah, probably even less, I would think. But yeah, no. Like I said, it's one of those when you're going through the experience, it's trying to convince yourself it's illusory. It's often a losing effort.
Yeah, it's almost like it doesn't matter if you take if you take, let's say, I'm trying to think what's if you take pig and then you take chicken, and that pig happens to also like to eat chicken, but you take that pig and that chicken and you ground them together in a meat grinder and you end up with this mystery meat. At the end of the day, that pig might see itself as different, but at the end of the day, they're both ending up in the same burger, which is kind of questionable and is probably being served to poor kids. And by poor kids, I don't mean economically poor. I mean poor you. Because the sad thing is that cafeteria lunches are horrifyingly disgusting. And obviously it's going to be worse if you're economically disadvantaged, but it's so bad that it affects. I'm not speaking from experience, but I've seen reports on it. Basically, schools and airports are where and it's the worst. Well, so technically what I'd say is the worst probably gets it is public schools and prisons, and then above that you get like colleges and airports. And so like there's definitely two tiers of it, but it's basically how food companies get rid of their excess and typically lower quality products.
Now I'm old. Remind me again, what exactly is the difference between a prison and a public school? Sorry, I couldn't resist that one. No, I was going to say, do they actually still have it where you have the real meat in the burgers? They haven't gone to the insect byproducts yet?
I don't know, but I have to imagine that if they had, there'd be a lot more of a fuss about it.
Well, that's like those Impossible burgers and stuff. You know, insects and plants.
No. Anyway.
Let's go on to something more appetizing. Hey,
I don't know about you, but there's actually 4 types of locusts that are apparently kosher, but only the Yemenite Jews know how to distinguish. So basically, if you want to have locust or cricket burgers, marry a Yemenite girl. She'll know how to make them.
And here I thought you were going to say they're the only ones that know how to cook them, right?
I mean, I guess by extension, if you don't know what something is, you're not going to know how to cook it. Unless it's mystery meat, then you might know how to cook it, but you'll never know what it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, when in doubt, always go with the the Vietnamese insect on a stick approach. Roasted insect on a stick.
If Cohen Klutz was here, he'd make a joke about long pig. Anyway. Oh, shoot. I hear the birds already.
But what does it really mean? First, who's my neighbor? Is a Jew in Uzbekistan my neighbor? Is a non-Jew in Uzbekistan my neighbor? It says your neighbor, Re'ah, and not your fellow human beings, which would be labriots, habriots. Does that imply that some people are excluded? If so, who? Should I love my enemy? If I hate myself, should I hate my neighbor also? No, Torah does not command you to love yourself. It has only 2 commandments to love God in Deuteronomy 6:5, and to love your neighbor in Leviticus 19:18. Second, what is love? What about tough love? If you rough up somebody for what you think is his own goods, does it count as love? Third, how can you be commanded to love? How can you make yourself have certain feelings? Fourth, is it even possible to truly love another as you love yourself? The Torah implies that it is when it says, Lo b'shamayim hi, meaning it, the Torah, is not in heaven. What the Torah commands to do is always doable. Fifth, there is a saying that goes, he who loves everybody loves nobody. Can we realistically ask a mother to love all children as much as she loves her own children?
But
that's
one of the other esoteric things, that truly nobody actually exists, that we're all just manifestations of the divine. And so by extension, we exist, but we do not at the same time. That is why the word for I, ani, is just a rearrangement of the word ein, which means nothing, or there is not. No, I mean, there is this really, and it also goes to the whole idea of ananata, of like the I don't know how to translate because I don't know Vedic well enough, but it's like the no self, or like the principle of no self, that the self doesn't actually exist. It's not saying that you don't exist. It's saying that the self, that the individual, and again, it's not saying that there isn't like something. I guess what it's saying is our idea of separation is our idea of separation, but it doesn't mean that that separation fundamentally exists. Like if you say that like you start, I mean, I don't, I don't know, like there, for instance, even skin, it's not a solid barrier. It's you know, I mean, it by its very nature it has pores, but beyond that, like, I mean, what I'm saying is there is a separation, there is a barrier, but but there's plenty of barriers within ourselves, and yet we would say that there isn't a separation between us. We might say we have different parts, but we're not going to say that that means that we have like separate parts of ourselves. They're different parts. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I tend to resolve that one by taking the combination as primary. Neither the part nor the whole is primary. It's the combination of the parts. It's the e pluribus unum principle.
So basically, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like you can't have a whole without that whole being composed of parts, and you can't have a part unless it's also part of a larger whole.
So in other words, it's like what is it? We're not separate, but we are different.
Right. You know, to translate that more into logic, it's like you have true, you have false, and then you sort of have a conjoined superposition of true, false. And it's the superposition that's the primary out of which you derive true and false. That concept don't. Okay.
I was just going to say, I'm not going to pretend like I understand that. I mean, I'm sure it makes sense. It's just when it gets to abstract things, it gets hard for me.
Yeah, I was going to say it's dialectical monism, and again, you're dealing into some of the deeper Taoist, and, you know, any sort of deep esoteric sort of teachings all end up at the same point.
Well, if you're going to go into the depths, don't forget to bring a towel.
And figure out how to keep it dry.
Yep. And see if we can find answers in our Jewish tradition. First, who is my neighbor? Are the neighbors in question fellow Jews or everybody? Here are the arguments for each possible answer. Why does your neighbor mean only your fellow Jew? Because the full verse is, you shall neither take revenge from nor bear a grudge against the sons of your people. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord's. The first part clearly.
But what does your people mean?
Refers only to fellow Jews, the sons of your people, Bnei Amecha. So the rest of the verse does also. This is Maimonides' conclusion.
But it doesn't say the sons of Israel. It says the sons of your people or your nation. Now, what if it's possible that it's actually... Now, you could argue that if you want to refer to nation, that would be Leumi, but still, could refer to a nation insofar as it could refer to your neighbors, to your fellow citizens, and because it could mean either, it basically means both. Because if you can interpret it one way legitimately, then it's true. So by extension, treat your fellow, your tribesmen, anybody you could identify with in some way as yourself. Again, the issue is, what if you can't identify with them? Do you not treat them as yourself? And the answer is, I mean, this is the thing. What if what if you can just trace the that people, that nation? Because if you interpret it as nation, then it has this idea of separateness. If you have it as people, it could you could extend it to mean the people, or the people of Adam, in which case you could extend it to all humanity. And so by that being a legitimate interpretation, I'm sure there's someone who's interpreted that way before, like within a rabbinic context, then within that idea, it would be legitimate, and by extension, it would mean that it is true. Now, given some people would understand to be maybe less true than some of the other interpretations, but it's kind of like, if you're supposed to treat, I guess what I'm saying is, if you hold that there's different grades of treating your fellow as yourself. Like, oh, well, in this case, it's talking about, your fellow, or, your tribesman. And it's like super serious. But then there's like treating just, your fellow human as yourself. But the thing is, if you hold that it's true, even though you might hold that one's more important, you can't just neglect the others because you view them as less important. I mean, it's like one thing where if it's like a yes or a no, where it's like by nature of, say, some action you either violate or you don't. It's not like I don't know. Maybe I'm just being picky on this, but I feel like at the end of the day, just baselessly treating someone badly, it's a choice. Truly, it is. I mean, some people could argue, "Oh, I've had a bad life," or I wasn't raised to treat people. But at the end of the day, like, you can change the way that you act any day. It's like it's just excuses that people make for themselves. At the end of the day, every decision you make is a decision. It's a choice, and so there are plenty of people who realize that and they're able to turn their lives around. But in the case of just treating someone as yourself, it could be like, okay, well, maybe treating someone as yourself, and you're like, you feel closer to them. You might literally give them your shirt off your own back because they don't have one. But I don't think that is like exclusive to like, that just because you might not be that close to, given, I think ideally you should, I don't know, because the question is ideally, how much should you be that way towards everyone? And I think in some ways you should be that way towards everyone based on merit. But like, just off the way that affinity bias works, it's at the end of the day, I think what ends up being seen as more important ends up having more to do with humanity than it does anything else. Well, then again, I mean, all the text is written down by humanity, even if you want to say it's divinely inspired. But so there's always that ability for corruption. But I guess what I'm saying is just this idea that you should treat your fellow as yourself. As long as you're treating someone decently and you're treating them good and you're treating them like you'd want to be treated, I think, okay, yeah, here's a good way of saying it. There's plenty of things that you'd like, to happen in your life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that here's a good example. There's a way that you would like your romantic partner to treat you, and there's a way that you would like your family members to treat you, and so on and so forth. But the thing is that doesn't, like, of course, in either case, the idea is you want to treat them like you'd want to be treated. But in any of those cases, those are different aspects of yourself that you want to be treated in certain ways. And so I think within that same idea, there's different dimensions to it when you're looking at different people and different kinds of people. That doesn't mean that you treat them badly or that you treat anyone like, better or worse, but you treat them differently. It's no different than this idea that there is no separation, that we are all, oh God.
To be fair, that's not exactly the lesson that I got from reading about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
I thought you were going to say Abraham Lincoln, in which case I was going to say, yeah, the Confederates and the Neo-Confederates, they had some messed up ideas, but unfortunately that one phrase could be applied in this case, but because of how corrupted it's been, I'm not going to say it.
No, I was going with the three fathers. And basically, they didn't really do a lot of distinguishing between their love of their family and their love of their romantic partners, because they were pretty much the same people.
I mean, they distinguished. There was just obvious overlap.
Yeah. That's what happens when you have that whole sister marriage thing.
Oh my God. I would not even be surprised if there would be people today who'd be like, you know what? I think that was a good idea. Why did we get rid of that? It must have been some conspiracy, because like, honestly, I would not even be surprised if there's people who are convinced that, like, they took our family marriage from us. how dare that Judeo-Christian ethos take away, family marriage? And it's like, meanwhile, actually it didn't. That was something entirely different.
Now they're making Sonny go to that other holler a mile over in order to find a spouse.
Yeah, if he goes over that hill there yonder, he might get lost, and if he gets lost, he might not come back. And if he doesn't come back, then we need to have another kid so that we can have another farmhand, and then we have to worry about that again. And so it's just easier for him to marry his sister.
Exactly.
And that's how you get lots of issues.
Lots and lots of issues. Yep. I was going to say, I still maintain that this whole loving others as yourself breaks down if you're dealing with a masochist.
True. But you know what? I don't think they were thinking in those terms necessarily.
No, they probably weren't.
It was more so like, ooh, that actually, I wonder, would it still, it's like with the, with the self-flagellation, like if people were into it, would it still be seen as like penance?
Good question.
It's like,
a penance if you enjoy it. That's the question.
Does it, is it faith that matters, or is it works?
Or is it just that you got whipped?
Well, no, that's a joke. That would be the works. The faith would be that that they're not, like, they wouldn't have faith because they're not actually feeling bad. But, well, I guess you could argue they're feeling good by feeling bad, but like directly they're not actually. I don't know. This I don't have any experience with this, so I'm just completely going out on a limb. But yeah, you know what? That actually, Angela Puka, Dr. Puka, she had on someone who talked about BDSM in the context of religious ritual. So that'd be interesting to rewatch that and see if that expands on any of this. But we're basically talking about a joke at that point. Anyway, let's move on.
Also, a little later in the same chapter, we are told, when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not taunt him. The stranger who sojourns with you shall be as a native from among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Since love of the resident stranger, the ger, is enjoined later in the same chapter, it makes sense that the two injunctions should refer to two different categories of people. The first to Jews only, the second to Gentiles only. However, some say that ger here means convert to Judaism, so it is not a different injunction. The second injunction merely reinforces the first by saying it does not apply only to born Jews. Finally, Talmudic restrictions on interaction with idolaters complicates applying the commandment of neighborly love to all, even though there is no injunction anywhere to hate idolaters. Now, why does your neighbor mean all of humankind? Because re'ah, neighbor, is used elsewhere in the Bible to refer to Gentiles as well. Also, in the Jerusalem Talmuds, Rabbi Akiva says, love your neighbor as yourself is a great principle of the Torah. Kelal gadol batorah. His colleague Ben Azai retorts, even greater is God created man in his image. The Midrash concludes that two creatures in the likeness of God are bound to love each other. So the second statement implies the first and applies to all creatures. The Midrash Tanhuma says that if you hate any man, you hate God who made man in his image. Note, however, that this does not tell us to love, only not to hate. Note that the full quote is, love your neighbor as yourself, I am the Lord. Why the addition of I am the Lord? Ben Azai implies, do this because I am the Lord and all humans are in my image. The Maggid of Trisk, 19th century sage, noted that the gematria of love, ahava, is 13, and the gematria of the Lord, the tetragrammaton, is 26. So he concludes, love of self plus love of neighbor equals reaching God. Pinchas Pelli, an Israeli rabbi, said that the phrase should be read, love your neighbor because he is like yourself in the image of God. He noted that it does not say as you love yourself, but as yourself. In Pirkei Avot, Hillel says, Ohev et habriot, love people. However, he adds, karvan la Torah, and bring them closer to the Torah. Does this imply Jews only, since the full Torah is for Jews only, or is proselytizing intended? Hillel also said, what is hateful to you, don't do to others. This is the whole Torah. All else is commentary. This principle has been embraced by other faiths as the golden rule. Also in Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Meir said, whoever engages in Torah study loves God and loves people. Ohev et habriot. Another relevant teaching is that we must be concerned about the welfare of non-Jews, at least in the interest of peace. Mipenei darchei shalom. The Rambam said, we bury the dead among the Gentiles, comfort their mourners, and visit their sick, because this is the way of peace. The implication of expediency does not detract from the commandment, either we do it or we don't, and we are supposed to do it. The conclusion the rabbis reached is that the commandment refers to Jews only, Ahavat Israel, but the extension to all mankind is encouraged. There's nothing wrong with a commandment referring to loving Jews only. It does not imply you should hate everybody else. For example, honor your father and your mother does not imply you should be disrespectful towards everybody else. It is okay to prioritize affections. First, immediate family, then extended family, community, co-religionists, co-nationals, people with whom we have some affinity, etc. Let us now turn to the question, does loving your neighbor imply loving your enemy? There are 4 relevant Jewish teachings. First, you may not hate your enemy. The Torah says, do not hate an Edomite because he is your brother. Do not hate an Egyptian, for you were strangers in his lands. Second, you must occasionally help your enemy.
You know, it's interesting.
The Torah says, if
people like, I'm not even going to say his name. It's not like I have a big channel, but either way, I'm not going to give him power by saying that shithead's name. But let's just say the Viking wannabe whose last name is a color and whose first name is Hebrew. Or, well, it's a Hebrew name, rather, and it's just one that's been assimilated into English. But in any case, no, it's actually ridiculous that he thinks that Jews hate Edomites or, by extension, Romans or, by extension, Christians. Like, no, sure, you'll find some crazies out there who will use that to justify anything, but, like, look at the shit that people like him, this one shithead does. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like, this is a big part of Talmud that people love to take out of context or they love to twist. But no, like, what's this? That you shall not hate an Edomite, for he's your brother. Like, literally.
The Torah says, do not hate an Edomite because he is your brother. Do not hate an Egyptian, for you were strangers in his lands.
Oh, and then I also know this one person who's convinced that Jews don't like Egyptians or something because of the Exodus story. And I'm like, dude, Jews have no issue with Egyptians. And specifically, he was talking about Copts, like the Coptic community. And I'm like, dude, no, Jews actually love, like, probably out of all Egyptians, the ones that Jews tend to like the most are Coptic Egyptians. But, like, this guy was just so blinded by his own hatred that he couldn't, or by his own bias, maybe not hatred, by his bias and his ignorance, that he couldn't see that people's issue wasn't with him being Egyptian or Coptic. It was with how he was treating people, which was actually pretty abhorrent. And it's like, yeah, people aren't going to treat you well if you treat them. Literally talking about this, treat others like you want to be treated. If you treat people like they're persecuting you when they're not, and then you treat them that same way, that means that you're basically acting persecutory towards them. Like, oh, there's something wrong with your community because you don't like me. It's like, no, we don't. So, and again, there's no we that doesn't like you, but the people who don't like you, it might be that you're giving off some bad vibes. Like, that's got nothing to do with your background. It's got everything to do with you. And so, I don't know. It's just, it's one of those things I take really seriously. It's kind of like treat others like you want to be treated. And if they're not treating you well, I don't think it's incumbent upon you to treat them well, which is kind of what the Christian ethos would say, that you're supposed to treat your persecutors well, even, which again probably has some, Roman stuff baked into it, just with, a lot of ideas of trying to get people to be submissive to the empire. But no, beyond that, I mean, there's nothing wrong with turning the other cheek. There's nothing wrong with trying to make peace. In fact, I think that it's good. It's the it's the better option. But at the same time, things are often way too complicated to just be like, oh yeah, just turn the other cheek. I think there's a difference between turning the other cheek and putting your arms down and basically making yourself defenseless. Because the truth is, it's like, even like any Christian who's like, oh yeah, Jesus was a pacifist, it's like, yeah, he also said that he didn't come to bring peace but to bring a sword. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that I don't know, like, war and peace are so interwoven that to say that one can't exist without the other, I think is very myopic, or like a very, like, yeah, myopic. Why does that not sound right? But no, I think that it's an issue of just war, and again, just war has become its own theory where people try to find ways to justify war, not about wars being just in and of themselves. Which I guess no war ever is just, but it's like the reason that wars are waged, and I mean that's such a complicated thing, and I am so glad that I didn't go into political science. Oh my god, I would have regretted that so much. It's like, it's fun to talk about every now and then, but to make a career, there was a time where I thought I wanted to go into politics. Fuck that shit so much.
You learned better. I was going to say, my take on it is I'm fairly sympathetic towards those people who come with a takeaway that the Jewish people are supposed to hate the Amalekites.
Wait, sorry, one more time?
That they're supposed to hate the Amalekites.
No, the part before that.
Oh, I'm sympathetic towards those who have that as their takeaway. I get there. They say you can't hate the Edomites, but they kind of make a big deal that you're supposed to hate the Amalekites.
Well, what's interesting is that the Amalekites were Edomites, and so it's this idea that the issue isn't that where someone comes from, but I guess at a certain point then it is. But it's more so what they are than who they are.
And the other one was the turning the other cheek. One of the interpretations I always thought was intriguing is the idea of that only means they get 1 second chance. After they decide to hit you on the other cheek, then it's game on.
Well, to be fair, you actually have 4 cheeks, so that implies 2 chances.
Yeah, I was going to say it's always the option if you want to turn your ass to them. So, yeah, I suppose.
All right.
Second, you must occasionally help your enemy. The Torah says, if you see the donkey of one who hates you lying down under its burden, do not just walk by. Stop and release him. And the book of Psalms adds, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. And if he's thirsty, give him water to drink. Third, you should try to turn your enemy into a friend. The Talmud says, who is a hero? He who turns an enemy into a friend. Fourth, you may have to kill your enemy.
Also, it's not just a hero. Gibor means someone who is strong. So who is a strong person? Someone who doesn't need to resort to violence. Again, maybe need to or have to versus doesn't. because there's a difference.
Enemy, if that is the only way to save yourself or others. The Talmud says, if someone comes to kill you, kill him first, if that is the only way to stop him. What about tough love? In the Midrash, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Hanina said, reproof leads to love. As it says in the book of Proverbs, reprove a wise man and he will love you. Love not accompanied by reproof is not love. The next question is, how can you be commanded to love? You can't, really. But you can be commanded to act in ways someone who loves would act, in hopes that it will lead to genuine love. The 19th century opus ה-כתב והקבלה, the written and oral tradition, suggests 9 ways. Do not fake affection for others, treat them with respect, seek the best for them, join them in their pain, greet them with friendliness, give them the benefit of the doubts, assist them physically, give them small loans and gifts, do not consider yourself better than them. The Rambam said about love of gods, if we just looked into nature and contemplated God's wondrous creation, we would be filled with love of gods. We ask ourselves, can the same idea be applied to people? The next question, is it even possible to truly love another as you love yourself? Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, the 19th century German commentator, notes that the Torah does not say ve'ahavta et reacha kamocha, but ve'ahavta le reacha kamocha. The first ve'ahavta et reacha kamocha would mean feel the same love for others as you feel for yourself, which is impossible. But the second, the actual quote from the Torah, ve'ahavta le reacha kamocha, means love that which pertains to your neighbor as if it pertained to you, meaning his well-being and happiness. The Ramban wrote in the 13th century, we should wish our neighbors the same well-being we enjoy ourselves. Deep emotional love is not what our verse refers to. That kind of love is expressed with different words in the Tanakh. For example, in the book of Samuel, we read, Jonathan loved David as his own soul, kenafsho. Another possibility is that the commandment is meant to be just an upper limit on love. Do not love your neighbor more than yourself. You don't have to give him more than you have yourself. You don't have to die to save his life. In the Talmud, Rabbi Akiva rules that your life takes precedence over another's life. Some say that your neighbor means those physically closest to you. They are harder to love because we interact with them, whence the need for a separate commandment to love them. It's easier to love someone far away as a theoretical abstraction. As a rule, the Torah only tells us to do what we would not normally do. Hasidic Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi said, all souls are of a single essence, united in their source in God. His master, the Baal Shem Tov, founder of Hasidism, said, one must love the lowliest of men as much as the greatest of us. When a person gets up in the morning and looks at himself in the mirror, he thinks, I am basically a good person. I have my faults and foibles. I'm not perfect, but I'm more good than bad. This is how we must evaluate our neighbor. He is basically good. I will overlook his faults. Shabbat Shalom.
Interesting.
So, any other thoughts? Or
sorry, what?
I was just curious. I was curious. I heard silence. I was curious if you had any other thoughts. So, any other thoughts?
I just had issues with the connection. So.
No. Oh, I know
Yes.
how that works. No problem.
Yeah. So, let's see. Continue with this. Where is it? Utah.
תשמורו בהמתך, לא תרביע כלאיים, שדך לא תזרע כלאיים, ובגד כלאיים, שעטנז לא יעלה עליך, ואם תרביע כלאיים, שדך לא תזרע כלאיים, תשמורו בהמתך, לא תרביע כלאיים, שדך לא תזרע כלאיים, ובגד כלאיים, שעטנז לא יעלה עליך, ואיש ישכב את אישה שכבת זרע, והיא שפחה נחרפת לאיש, והופדה לא נפתתה, או חופשה לא ניתן לה, בחורף תהיה לא יומתו, כי לא חופשה, והביא את אשמו לאדוני אל פתח אוהל מועד, אל אשם, וכיפר עליו הכהן באל האשם לפני אדוני על חטאתו אשר חטא, ונסלח לו מחטאתו אשר חטא. וכי תבואו אל הארץ, מונטעתם כל עץ מאכל, וערלתם עורלתו את פריו 3 שנים, יהיה לכם ערלים לא יאכל, ובשנה הרביעית יהיה כל פריו חודש הילולים לאדוני, ובשנה החמישית תאכלו את פריו, להוסיף לכם תבואתו, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. לא תאכלו על הדם, לא תנחשו ולא תעוננו, לא תקיפו פאת ראשכם, ולא תשחית את פאת זקנו, ולא
לא תנחשו. That's from the root nachash, which is also the root for nachash, which means serpent or snake. So to divine and snake are connected. Kind of interesting. It's like, you know, with the military, how they have like those snake cams. They do it right. That way you can see what's ahead of you before you actually look with your own eyes. So it makes sense even in the modern day, snakes, but different types.
פאת ראשכם ולא תשחית את פאת זקניך, וסרט לנפש לא תיתנו בבשרכם, וכתובת טעם טעם לא תיתנו בכם, אני אדוני. אל תחלל את ביתך להזנותה, ולא תזנה הארץ ומלאה הארץ זימה. את שבתותיי תשמורו ומקדשי תיראו, אני אדוני. אל תפנו אל האובות ואל הידעונים, אל תבקשו לטומאה בהם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. מפני שיבה תקום, והדרת פני זקן, ויראת מאלוהיך. אני אדוני. וכי יגור איתך גר בעשיכם, לא תונו אותו, כי אזרח מכם יהיה לכם. הגר איתכם, ואהבת לו כמוך, כי גרים הייתם בארץ מצרים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
That was a reference to
לא תעשו
living the
עוול
Jewish yourself.
במשפט, במידה, במשקל ובמשורה, מאזני צדק אבני צדק, אפת צדק והין צדק יהיה לכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. מאזני משקל ובמשורה, מאזני צדק אבני צדק, אפת צדק והין צדק אבני צדק.
Interesting. So it's Mozne, so Uzne, then you have Avne. Avne, Uzne. I wonder, it's clearly a play on words. This is interesting. And then also Bim Mishura, make sure that you have Bimishpat. Wait, and then you have Tzedek as well, so Mishor Tzedek, they connected here as well.
והין צדק יהיה לכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, ושמרתם את כל חוקותיי ואת כל משפטיי, ועשיתם אותם. אני אדוני. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, ואל בני ישראל תאמר, איש איש מבני ישראל ومن الجاب بإسرائيل أشد الدين من زرعه لمولك موت يومات عام هارس يرجمه فآبين وأني الدين بفني بإيش همو بيخرتي أوثو مقيرم عمو كي من زرعه نثان لمولك لما عن طمن قدشي والحليل شم قدشي.
Interesting. So this is interesting. I never noticed before. So look what it says here. So it says, alright, saying, let's see, any man from the children of Israel or from the proselytes who dwells in Israel, who shall give of his seed to Molech, or for Molech, literally, they shall certainly be put to death. Am haaretz, the people of the land. Now here it has am haaretz as this is where the later gets interpreted as the pagans, or the pagans, the imbeciles, the people that really don't know better. So they will pelt him, they will kill him. Yirgemuhu, regem. They'll pelt him, rain stones down upon him, and I will give my face to that man, and I will cut him off from the midst of his people, for from his offspring he had given for a Molech, in order to defile my sanctuary. Notice this. How come giving a Molech is defiling the sacrifice of Adonai? Because it's implicit. because the Moloch isn't another god. It's a type of offering. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, we've talked about Moloch being a type of offering rather than a god before. Yeah, no, I agree.
He had given him Moloch in order to defile my sanctuary and to desecrate my name that is holy. But if they shall avert the people of the land their eyes from that man when he gives from his offspring to Moloch, not to put him to death, I shall focus upon that man and upon his family. I will cut him off and all who stray after him to stray after the Moloch from the midst of the people, and the person who shall turn to the Ovot and the Yidonim to stray after them, I shall focus on. Okay, interesting.
عينهم منها إيش هو بفتو من زرعه لمولخ لبلتي هميث أثو وسمتي أني إثباناي فإيش هو ومشبحته ويخرتي أثو وإذ كل هالزونيم أحرام لزنوث أحريهم مولخ قرب عمام وهالنفش أشر تفني إلى أبوث وإلها يدعوني لزنوث أحرم وناثتي إثباني بالنفش هاي ويخرتي أثو من قرب عمو ويتقدشتم ويثم كدوشيم كي أني أدوناي אלוהיכם ושמרתם את חוקותיי ועשיתם אותם אני אדוני מקדישכם כי איש אשר יקלל את אביו ואת אמו מות יומת אביו ואמו הלל דמו בו ואיש אשר ינאף את אשת איש אשר ינאף את אשת רעהו מות יומת הנואף והנואפת ואיש אשר ישכב את אשת אביו ערוות אביו וגילה מות יומתו שניהם דמיהם בם ואיש אשר ישכב את כלתו מות יומתו שניהם תבל עשו דמיהם בם ואיש אשר ישכב את זכר משכבת אישה תועבה עשו שניהם מות יומתו דמיהם בם ואיש אשר יפתח את אישה ואת אמה.
It's referring most likely to pederasty rather than to homosexuality, which is prohibited, and that has to do with Leviticus probably being a Greek era text, or at least something that was really emphasized for all of Israel in response to Hellenism, but that's a story for another time.
ישרפו אותו ואתן ולא תהיה זימה בתוככם ואיש אשר ייתן שחובתו בבהמה מות יומת ואת הבהמה תהרגו ואישה אשר תקרב אל כל בהמה לרבעה אותה והרגת את האישה ואת הבהמה מות יומת דמיהם בם ואיש אשר ייקח את אחותו בת אביו או בת אמו
So according to this, Abraham's in hot water. A man who shall take his sister, the daughter of his father, or the daughter of his mother, and he shall see her nakedness, and she shall see his nakedness. It is a disgrace, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. Interesting. They were cut off from their people in a sense because they started a new one. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like consequences, results may vary.
وهي ترقيك اتعرضوا حسدوا ونقلتوا لعينيك.
Interesting. That's very strange. It's saying chesed is a disgrace. This is 6th Aliyah. I've got to check this out. It is 6th of Kedoshim. All right. Let's see. Chesed. Good. Interesting. Goodness, kindness, faithfulness, but it could also be a reproach or a shame. This is fascinating. I've never heard it in that context before. Let's see. Oh, interesting. So here it's saying, and if a man shall take his sister, scripture mentions the term kicha, taking, which generally denotes the taking of a woman as a wife in the case of a sister, although betrothal to her is not valid because a brother and sister sleep together in one house, and when his desire overpowers him, he takes her and draws her to himself, and he does not have to come to her as one does to a woman who is a harlot. What? It is chesed. In one opinion of the commentators, chesed here means shame because all people will naturally be ashamed of this ugly sin. This being used here as in the Aramaic language, Francois translated, for that were a disgrace unto us, for they were chisudo unto us. Yonatan ben Uziel also translated, and I will lay it for a reproach. I will lay it chisudo. And in the language of the sages we found, because shechasto, he shamed him in public. Similarly, let he heareth it yechastecha, meaning lest he cause you to shame upon revealing the secret of another, and they shall be cut off in the sight of the children of their people. What is this Bachia? No, it was too long to read. I got this one. Chesed, who is a wicked thing. Chesed, disgrace. Chesuda, interesting. So chesed, according to that, means disgrace as well. Let's see. This is one of the most strange things I've what on earth? Yeah, I'm going to just move on from here.
אשר ישכב את אישה دوا وغلا إث عروته إث مقوره هي عرا وهي قلتا إث مقور دميها ونخرتو شنهم مقيرف عمام وعرت أحوز
I think you may have a connection slide on me again.
إميخ وأحوذ أبيخ لو تغلي كي اتشئرو هي عرا عبنم يساء وإيش أشير يشكب إذ دوذثو عروات دودو إلا حطام يساء عريريم يموثو وإيش أشير يقاح إذ إيشت أحيم نداهي عروات أحيم جلا عريريم يهيو وش مرتين إذ كل حقوتاي وإذ كل مشفاطاي وعسيتين أوثام ولو ثقيت إثم هارس أشير أني מביא אתכם שמה לשבת בה ולא תלכו בחוקות הגוי אשר אני משלח מפניכם כי את כל אלה עשו ואחוס בם ואומר לכם אתם תירשו את אדמתם ואני אתננה לכם לרשת אותה ארץ זבת חלב ודבש אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הבדלתי אתכם מן העמים והבדלתם בין הבהמה הטהורה לטמאה ובין העוף הטמא לטהור ולא תשקסו את נפשותיכם בבהמה ובעוף ובכל אשר תרמוס האדמה אשר הבדלתי לכם לטמא והייתם לי קדושים כי קדוש אני אדוני ואבדיל אתכם מן העמים להיות לי ואיש או אישה כי יהיה בהם אוב או ידעוני מות יומתו באבן ירגמו אותם דמיהם בם.
To say something nice about somebody that they may believe is too generous. They might not think that that's an accurate description of them. It's okay. It's okay. Err on the side of over estimating somebody, because what will happen is it's just the way that Hashem made the world. They will grow into it. It will actually induce a certain growth. So, and I'll tell you, there's a very solid source for this, in addition to the Shalah, how he interprets Shlomo Melech's instructions about rebuke. I can give you an example of practical implementation of this. Practical implementation. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once was speaking at a Fabrengnus after his father-in-law passed away, and he said how his father-in-law, his Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, he wrote a lot of letters. There are many books called 𝒒𐃃𤔃𤐃 of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Also, the Rebbe also has 𝒒����𤃃, but he wrote a lot of letters. He answered a lot of correspondence. And you'll look at the way that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to people, and there's always these like honorific titles, the way he addresses people. He wrote to a lot of rabbis and scholars, and there's sometimes...
Anyway, we could listen to that more another time. Or actually, just
very very grandiose titles. But this is the rabbinic idiom. This is the expression. This is the way that Torah scholars write. So the Rebbe pointed out that there are a lot of different titles, but one title that his father-in-law, his Rebbe, would seemingly give to everybody was Ish Yirei Elokim. Ish Yirei Elokim means the God-fearing person. And the thing is, there were people to whom the Frierdiker Rebbe was writing who were not what we would objectively consider God-fearing. They were not necessarily Torah observant. And yet the Frierdiker Rebbe would write to them and refer to them as Ish Yirei Elokim, the God-fearing person. So the Frierdiker Rebbe actually spoke about this himself at a Fabrengen, and said, people have asked me, why do I give everybody the title Ish Yirei Elokim? And the answer is because every Jew has fear of God. It just needs to sometimes be dislodged. You have to shake it loose. He said, as men get them a tresel, if you shake them up a little bit, so then the fear of God comes out. So ideally, it shouldn't have to come to that the person should have to be shaken up. It should come out on his own. But if you have to shake him up, so you shake him up. So at the Shiva of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe was speaking about this, and he said that the Rebbe recalled that he received a letter from somebody, and the person wrote to the Rebbe and said that the person wrote a letter to the Rebbe saying that he, the letter writer, had once received a letter from the previous Rebbe, and in it, the previous Rebbe wrote to this person, I don't use titles loosely. If I address somebody with a particular title, that is a fact. That is a fact. And then the Rebbe commented and said, whether that fact is a present fact or it is a fact that's going to become a fact, but one way or another, it'll become the truth. Either it's true now or it will be true. So that's the idea, that think good of somebody, call them something that's maybe overly generous. It's not being Pollyanna. It's not playing make. Not being Pollyanna. It's not maybe overly generous. It's not being Pollyanna. It's not playing make believe. You're actually boosting the person to grow into that greatness. Okay. So let's go back to our Parsha. Let's go back to that first couple of verses.
Well, no, actually, let's just finish up. But yeah, I need to get to sleep. But do you have any last thoughts before we close out?
Not a whole lot. The only other thing I would add is one of the alternative formulations of the golden rule that I learned, which was, the one with the gold makes the rules.
What about the silver rule or the copper rule, or do those not get as much attention?
They haven't gotten much attention. I haven't heard specific ones of those.
Yeah. But yeah, also something to look forward to. Me and Graham will hopefully be streaming in the near future with 𝒒𐤃𐤔𝐤. He has a self-made RPG called, was it Kaddish Quest, which should be interesting. I have some of the details, but he wanted me to keep it to a minimum for the sake of basically the shock value is a big part of the fun. So I'm not going to give away any of the spoilers, but it should be fun, and I'll post more about that in the community area or community section or whatever once I know. And right now it's just me and Graham need to figure out a time that works the best between us and also with 𝒒𤃃𐤃𝐤. So yeah. On that note, unless you have any other thoughts.
Nope, been fun as always.
All right, let's see now to finish this out. All right. Baruch atah. Wait. One second. Just need to find one. Oh, right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nathan lanu Torah emet בחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Want to tell the Rebbe the words of the new song that we're singing with Mashiach, right? So I'm just going to read them. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. Okay? We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. I'll have no fear, no, she'll be this year.